Hey everyone, welcome back to Yuri's Box. In this video, I'm going to look at the correlation between the Homebuilders ETF, XHB, and the S&P 500. If you like this kind of content, consider leaving a like, and as usual, nothing in this video is financial advice. So I'll try to keep this relatively short video. So basically the idea between when looking at the S&P 500 and XHB as a representation of the home builders in general is that whenever you see outperformance from the home builders, you can take that as a signal that perhaps the move has some substance to it. On the flip side, when you see relative underperformance from on behalf of the home builders compared to the S&P 500, you can generally take that as an indication that, there might be some pain ahead. So here I've highlighted a few times in history which we can look at. I'll look at the bad news first. Okay, so this September 17th to October 29th of 2018. So starting here, highlighted in red, we had approximately a 25% drawdown, or rather, let's look at it here to the first low, a 20% drawdown on the Home Builders ETF. Now, going to the S&P 500 in 2018, it's right here. The first thing you can notice, okay, is that the downward move on the Home Builders started on September 17th, while here it actually took a little longer. Okay, it took about 2 weeks longer than compared to the Home Builders drawdown. Just to be exact, November the 5th we measured, and I'll measure that right here. If you look at, let's say, September 17th, actually here it was a 10% drawdown. Now, what's noticeable again is that the drawdown here actually signaled, again, the fact that the home builders were underperforming in that time frame actually signaled that there was more pain ahead, and eventually this led to a 20% drawdown on the S&P 500. Okay, so that's the first example of kind of negative news. The second example of negative news is not too long ago, which is actually at the end of 2021. Now, on the Home Builders ETF, the real pain really started on December 13th. Okay, now to the first low, if I'm not mistaken, what did I measure down here? January 30th. Okay, so from here till January 30th, we're talking about a 20% drop on the home builder stocks. Now, going back to the S&P 500, right here, again, as you can notice, it generally takes longer. Okay, when the home builder stocks are underperforming, it takes a while for the S&P 500 to catch on, but eventually, on that time frame, from December 13th to January 30th, again down here, we had about a 10% drawdown. Okay, so again, whenever you see the home builder stocks underperforming and leading the S&P 500, you can generally take that as an indication that there might be more pain ahead. Also, try to look and see as well as if the move is, again, the S&P is lagging the home builder stocks. So again, just to give you a concrete example of that, back in 2018, the home builders actually started moving on the week of September 17th. Okay. on the week of September 17th, the S&P was green. And it actually didn't turn red, significantly red, 2 weeks later, until two weeks later, okay? So that's really the bad news. It wouldn't be fair if I didn't highlight, again, what happens on the flip side. And the best two examples, I mean, you can go back and find plenty, but just to keep things relevant to today, if you use this kind of system on the way up as well, it would have worked pretty nicely as well. Like in 2022 in October, going from the 17th of October till the first real top in January 30th, you'll see that the homebuilder stocks had about a 36% rally, while the S&P from the week of October 17th, just to be fair, I'll take the week of October 10th and January 30th, about 20%. Again, the difference is smaller, the spread is narrower, but again, what you can see is that there's outperformance on behalf of the homebuilder stocks, okay? The next best example is October 23rd of 2023, where again, we can measure out until the 11th of December, which is really the first significant top. We had a 36% move, okay? Same thing here, October 23rd. December right here is about if I'm not measuring this correctly right here, about 15% rise, okay? So it isn't an exact science. For example, if you look at the move we had from the end of July 2023 to the low of October 2023, I'm fairly certain that you'll see something curious happen here. We had an 11% drop on the S&P 500, while at the same time, the homebuilder stocks were underperforming at that point. So again, it isn't really an exact science, and it can lead to some false signals like you saw in the summer of 23, okay? But again, it's a nice thing to keep an eye on. Now, the curious thing, as I highlighted already in the text, is that today we see something that is quite similar to the end of 2021, okay? So remember, at the end of 2021, this is the homebuilder stocks we're looking at right now. The real first sign of problems, came in the week of December of 23, December the 13th, pardon me. And it took the S&P 500 about 4 weeks, about a month to catch on to that move. Okay, so by the time we had the homebuilder stocks were down about 15%. Right here, I mean, the S&P still hadn't caught on really. Okay, so going back to today, homebuilder stocks, we can measure out the top, put in November 25th of 2024, and ever since then we are currently down about 23%, okay? Now again, November 25th, the week of November 25th, the S&P 500 was still having a relative okay time. Now granted, we were stuck in this range, but as I pointed out before, just like at the end of 2021, it took a while for the S&P 500 to really catch on to what was happening in the home builder space. So again, I'm not advocating for canned tuna and canned corn and a bunker underneath the ground. I'm just pointing out, in history, whenever you see something like this, it isn't a positive for the markets. Now, again, I'll stress again what my viewpoint is, that all of this really takes kind of the back seat. Correlations, technicals, whatever, because we're really at a point where we're being held hostage by the economic outlook. If we have data come in positive, then my expectation is to see the S&P 500 return on the uptrend, just like Bitcoin and everything else. If, however, the economic outlook looks like it wants to confirm what we saw in February, okay, and I keep going back to the S&P PMIs that we got in last month. If we confirm, in fact, that what we saw last month wasn't a fluke and wasn't, just a one-off, then it's all for nothing. And, it's likely, in my opinion, that we see pain ahead. We also have April 2nd, the tariff announcement, and I went over that in a previous video. And again, if we see tariffs get delayed, I think that is the worst case scenario. If we see anything like, tariffs getting put in place, but with a slight tweak, like Trump maybe hinted at, like with when he talked about flexibility, that is still bad news. However, it could be viewed as positive in the short term, because again, you're avoiding the worst case scenario, but again, you still have to deal with tariffs. And of course, the best case scenario is just walking back the tariffs entirely. Okay, if you see something like that, if you see a positive shock, then again, you can ignore all the squigglies and ignore all the doomsday, like again, even the home builders seem to be signaling, and you can go back on your merry way and buy the dip, and we can all go back having fun. But as long as the economic data seems to hint towards something a little bit more negative, we're really being held hostage by it. Okay, so I'll keep it short. Keep an eye on the home builder stocks, as today we really see relative underperformance compared to the S&P 500, and a move that has actually led the S&P 500. Okay, so this move really started. If you really want to be, pessimist, you can say it started on October 21st, the week of October 21st. I'll just take, the last top of November 25th, and we've seen underperformance ever since then. And again, in the week of November 25th, the S&P was still, chugging along, fairly nicely. So again, keep an eye out for this curious little correlation. But at the end of the day, remember, at least in my opinion, economic data is king. Okay. If you like this kind of content, consider liking this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye.